is our Senior Director of Climate Policy and Strategy. And we have Naomi Swickard, who is our Senior Director of RED Plus Program Development and Innovation. So we really wanted to take advantage of having so many of our stakeholders in the same place in this IETA hub to provide you with a bit of an update on what we announced back in September in Climate Week. For those who are not aware of that, I'll just give you a brief overview. We did a very intensive listening tour with our stakeholders. Judith met with over 50 organizations. We also had a survey. And through that process, we were really able to gather together a lot of streams about what we should be focusing on as an organization. And based on that, we set a number of strategic commitments. And today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on several of those. But if you're interested in the update on where we are with all of them, there is a handout that is just outside the room, and it's also on our website right now. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start with Andrew Howard, and he has been our lead on the submission to ICVCM, which is something that we had committed to doing before COP. And so I just have a couple of questions for Andrew that are actually based on stakeholder questions that we have already been getting. Keep in mind, if we don't answer some questions that you have, we will have a Q&A at the end. So please feel free to store up your questions and ask us at the end. All right, so to kick this off, Andrew, before we kind of go into Verra's submission for the ICVCM, what are your thoughts on the ICVCM, excuse me, framework overall?
Great, thanks, Hilary, and good morning, everybody. Thoughts on the ICVCM overall? I think where we're very strong is that we're very supportive of the ICVCM. It's been an initiative which has been through quite a long evolution itself, a very quick evolution over the last year or so. I think, a number of people say to me, well, at the beginning you didn't like the ICVCM, what's happened? And, there has certainly been some concerns that we had at the beginning, but the evolution that there's been over the last year or so, year and a half, has been really positive. And I think where it comes out is a very good source of sort of independent wisdom, if you like, on what integrity means within the voluntary carbon market. We as a standard, we've been around for 15 or so years, longer than that. We believe that integrity is already embodied within our own standards. But what is very useful with the ICVCM is to have an independent check of that. And we're certainly hoping for a vindication of what we've been doing. We have, of course, have new directions that we're taking as a program. And I think when you get to Naomi, you'll be speaking to her about some, particularly in the red area. What ICVCM is also allowing us to do is to reinforce those changes as we go forward. So I'm happy to share more about what we're doing there. The transparency that the ICVCM is going to bring is going to be really great for the market. I think there's so many new standards coming in. And, whereas I think that we're a very established standard and we try to make everything transparent, and we've got a very refined rule set, we appreciate that that's something which now needs to be done across the whole market. And ICVCM is really going to be strong on that, I think.
Great. So can you expand on that a bit to talk about Verra's actual submission? We've been getting a lot of questions about what we submitted, what we didn't submit, and why. If you could kind of go into the thinking behind that, behind our submission.
Sure. So essentially what we've done is we've put the full program forward. So our what will be assessed for our verified carbon standard, the VCS, is all project types. What we have done, however, is we have withheld some of the older methodologies from the assessment. So what we're doing is being very comprehensive, but as I mentioned before, we're seeking to reinforce some of the changes that we're making in the program. So you'll see a couple of instances where what we would like to have assessed through the ICVCM is the newer version of a methodology, but not the older versions of the methodology. And that is because we are changing our methodologies for good reason. I think the pathway of a program like ours in general is one of continuous improvement. We often speak of it as a journey of integrity. It's not a destination of integrity. So there are always changes that take place within our methodologies, within our standards. And we have had some very major changes in the last months. RED in particular is one you're about to hear about. And what we're doing is we're trying to push the market towards those newer methodologies. So what we would expect is those newer methodologies under the VCS, we're certainly hoping will receive the CCP label through the ICBCM. But in not putting the older methodologies forward, it means that the issuance which occurred under those older methodologies can still get a CCP label. But what will be needed is for those projects to transition across to the new methodology. So we'll shortly be providing some guidance, I think, either later in December or early next year. There'll be new guidance coming out, which will be seeking to help project developers, project proponents, take their existing projects, bring them across to the new methodology. And then also, and this is very important, to be able to retroactively adjust the issuance which has occurred in the past. So what that means is, in practice, you can go to a new methodology. You can then look at the old issuance of ECUs, which was taking place under the VCS, and in applying the new methodology, that number might change. In many cases, that number might go down a bit. What happens is you can adjust the past issuance through a process of compensation, through a process of canceling credits. And when that number of past issuances has been adjusted to the new number created under the new methodology, then you'll also be able to apply CCP labels to those past issuances as well. Perhaps not as many as had been issued in the past, but that is a way of being able to, even for the historical issuances, to be able to put those also under the ICBCM framework. And we would really encourage project proponents to do that. We think that is really working with the evolution of the market, with the ICBCM. It'll give greater value, greater flexibility, greater fungibility to the credits that you have.
Great. So if we could pull up just a little bit now and look more at the big picture, what signal do you hope that this submission from Verra is going to send to the market?
Right. I think what we really hope for, and this is not, well, let me clarify as well. I think the ICBCM is something that we would have run with anyway, but I think within the current climate that we have, the kind of concerns and the lack of confidence that there is within the market, we're hoping that this will contribute a long way to restoring the confidence in the way that crediting programs work within the market. There's obviously, as we all know, there's been quite a few articles and controversies of late which have spooked the market. It's very clear to us that a lot of that criticism is focused on quite a narrow number of project types. It's not something which is applicable to the whole suite of projects or to the whole voluntary carbon market. And yet in people's perceptions, those concerns are there. And we hope that the VCS will be vindicated for the integrity we believe is in the program. And that'll be positive for the market as a whole, I think.
Right. So you touched on this just a little bit in some of the other responses, but what are the next steps related to this process, both for Verra and for the ICBCM? Right.
Well, I think this, the idea of being able to transition to the new methodologies is very key. So we're in the terminology that we're developing, we're starting to call that a pathway for older projects to transition to new methodologies. And to receive CCP labels through that. I should say that that's applicable to quite a small number of projects. RED is one, which Naomi will be talking about. There's also, we've also applied it within improved forest management and cook stoves, where we're only putting the most recent methodologies forward, or in the IFM case, the new methodologies which we're bringing out for that. So that's one thing. The other thing is the assessment itself. So we have put in our application for the assessment from the ICBCM, where that will come through in various stages through 2024. So the assessment of our program as a whole, we would expect in early 2024. But then the assessment of the categories, the project categories, that's something which is going to come through in some fashion, I think my guess is throughout the whole of 2024. We'll see some of the fast-tracked project types already quite early in the year, and I think even Q1 potentially for that. But others will be coming through towards the middle of the year or into the second half.
So this last question I have for you is maybe a better question for ICVCM, but we still get this question from our stakeholders fairly regularly. Is do we see the ICVCM CCPs evolving at all? And do we think that there will be changes to them going forward? And if so, what might that mean to the programs approved under the ICVCM?
Right, there certainly will be an evolution in the ICVCM over time. I think the next iteration of the assessment framework, which is the document which contains all of the criteria, that's expected to take effect from 2026. So there is a bit of a time lag there, and there are to be continuous work programs through the next 2 years in order to create that new assessment framework. Some particular areas which are of real interest to us one is around the area of safeguards, environmental, social safeguards. What we've done recently in one of the recent updates of our VCS program is to be much more granular and in terms of the information we seek from project developers on how they're meeting social environmental safeguards. As we go forwards, we'll be taking that a step forwards ourselves. This is our intent, but also it's foreseen under the ICVCM generally is for project standards like ourselves to be much more proactive in assessing where the risks are that different safeguards might be problematic. So if we can identify where the risks are, then we can further refine our requirements. Permanence is another one where we we have crediting periods which start at 20 years and can go out to 100 years. So in line with the ICVCM requirements, we've already changed our requirements to hit 40 years for monitoring and compensation. But as the ICVCM goes forward, we want to make that period longer. And that's challenging because of many reasons, particularly around contracts and so forth. But these are things where we can actually join up with the rest of the VCM community and we can work together through the ICVCM. So I think the ICVCM is increasingly going to become more of a forum for these collaborative exercises. And I think the job of our standards is to see where they're going and to take that as to inform the way we are developing our own programs. But also, we're doing work which is actually trying to get ahead of where the ICVCM is going. And, as you might have heard, we've recently entered into a collaboration with other crediting programs. We've announced that here at the COP. And this is something where, we hope to actually move ahead and start giving feedback to the ICVCM as to how do they need to then bring the rest of the market up behind us.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So you teased this very well, but another commitment we made under the new era for Verra was the RED methodology, which was officially launched after many years of expectations on the 27th of November. And Naomi was leading that process. And so I am going to just pepper her with some of the questions that we've been getting. And again, if you guys have questions around this, she'll be available to answer them after. So this new methodology has been in the works since 2020. I think a lot of people don't understand the amount of work and the amount of steps that go into updating these. Could you give us just a little peek under the hood of the major steps in this process that we've been undergoing for the last couple of years?
Sure. And in fact, I would say it started even before that because we were looking at ways to consolidate the methodologies in a different way. And then heard very strongly from stakeholders that we should be going towards this approach of top-down, nationally aligned accounting. So we really dove into the development of that specifically in about 2020. And our process really follows best practice for standards, following ICO guidance, which means that we have a process for drafting, we have expert and peer review, it goes through public consultation, it goes through review by independent VVBs and review again through experts in every step of that way where issues come up. And then finally our consolidation of that and editing and whatnot. So it's been a very long process with a very large number of people involved in terms of the review and in terms of feedback and debate around getting us to this final version.
Excellent. So I know you could take this whole session just talking about all the elements of the methodology, but if you had to consolidate it, if you had to pick just the top 3 elements of this math that you feel are kind of the most revolutionary? Which ones would you highlight?
Yeah, so the way that the new RED methodology works, and to be clear, for now, this is covering avoided unplanned deforestation. So we have other updates coming soon. But for avoided unplanned deforestation, we have essentially flipped the accounting on its head. So number one would be that we are now looking at a top-down system that is nationally aligned, which ensures that all of the activities within a particular country, whether it's a project area or a non-project area, together cannot add up to more than the historical deforestation of the country. And that's really important, both from an integrity perspective, but also from a country and national alignment perspective. So as you all are very familiar with, the Paris Agreement and the NDC context is very much country driven. And so while there are many different ways that one might be able to assess the impact of these projects, we've selected this approach because of that national alignment and to make sure that we're driving towards data that is consistent with the national government. So that would be number one. The second would be the technology side. So this methodology, remote sensing has always been a core part of project development in the agriculture and forestry space. But this is really leveraging the latest available technology. And we are collaborating with a number of providers like C-Trees and Space Intelligence and many of the other players in this sector that have really been able to incorporate the latest satellite technology in remote sensing with a high set of requirements in terms of accuracy and uncertainty compared with ground truthing to ensure that we're really implementing the latest available tech. And then finally, the way that this is being collected is Verra-led. So historically, projects have gone out and defined their own reference areas. They've collected the data, they've analyzed that, applied it to projects, and it's independently verified. But that process was all project-led. And this is, again, a top-down process. So Verra is coordinating the collection of activity data, which means we will have a set of activity data around the world that is consistent and comparable, while also specific to a given country and geography, which will both improve the consistency and remove any potential for conflict of interest. But it also means that we are really streamlining the process for projects. They'll be able to just request the data and get it delivered. And for project identification going forward, you'll also be able to look at the data and identify where projects need to be implemented, where you see, higher threat of deforestation, streamlining some of the due diligence process as well. Great.
If I could have you just go back to your second point on the advanced use of tech. We do get a lot of questions. What does that mean? What exactly kind of advanced tech is being used? Could you just expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it's really about leveraging the latest remote sensing technology that is available for finer grained analysis. And Sassan could certainly tell you a lot more about that than I can. We are also looking at, as we look at other activities. So again, this new methodology focuses on unplanned deforestation. In the next year, we'll also be working on planned deforestation and degradation. And again, we see real opportunities for innovation there and considering things like direct above ground biomass measurement. And so really looking as we build this next generation of methodologies that we're incorporating what's available now, but we're also designing them in a way that they can continue to incorporate the latest tech as we evolve.
Great. So as you know, it's been a tough year in the media for RED. Do you expect this new methodology will address all of the concerns and criticisms out there about this type of project?
I think this new methodology really goes a long way to addressing the majority of the concerns. The way that the methodologies were originally written was based on good science. It was based on the best available technology and understanding at the time. And we've seen a big evolution in that. And this new methodology really incorporates that evolution from lessons learned, from new tech, from new science, and builds it into the methodologies. But again, there are different ways to account for this. And I think that again, we've gone in this direction because it is conservative, because it is consistent with national accounting. But these are dynamic ecosystems. They rapidly change. The technology will continue to rapidly change. And so we will need to continuously stay on top of that evolution. The other part of this, of course, is that there are many other aspects to the program and aspects to the system that also need continuous improvement. So we have put out some additional requirements on safeguards in VCS versions 4.5. We will be doing even more on that front, including looking more at some transparency mechanisms with version 5. So that is also very much an evolving space. And then, of course, some of the criticism simply relates to VCS operations, which I'm sure Judith can speak to. But so with all of these different efforts in this new era for Verra, I think we're really driving towards something that should improve upon and ensure much greater perception of that integrity.
Great. So Andrew briefly touched on this in the context of our ICVCM submission, but could you do a little bit more of a deep dive for what this means for our existing projects that have registered under the old RED methodologies?
Yeah. So, transitions are never easy, and we are fully aware of that. For the older projects, it is possible to shift to the new methodology. So again, speaking about avoided unplanned deforestation projects, they will need to do that shift after 6 months of the data being available for that particular country. But we also have a number of mechanisms for helping to bring projects forward. So as Andrew mentioned, if the project has remaining credits from prior vintages under the old methodologies, they can choose to reassess that period with the new methodology, make any correction that is needed, and assuming that there are any credits left, those credits would be CCP eligible, assuming we get CCP eligibility for the methodology. So this provides a way to both transition those credits forward and also to hopefully increase the price with those that are under the new methodology and CCP eligible. We're starting to see some indications that those price signals will be there, but of course it'll be an evolution.
Great. And you mentioned that this is just the start, that there's other updates coming. So can you give us just a little sneak peek at the roadmap ahead? Like what are the next things that we're working on updating? I say we, but I mean you.
There's a whole team behind me, not just me. Yeah, we will be putting out a number of updates to other methodologies. So we are launching just after COP into looking at planned deforestation. Those updates won't be quite as revolutionary as this methodology, but they are looking at establishing some additional mechanisms to ensure ongoing credibility of those units. And we are also reassessing our degradation activities and looking at what how we should handle those going forward. And there are also a number of updates within our improved forest management methodologies. Again, really trying in all of these cases to incorporate the latest science and technology and make sure that we remain ahead of the curve on integrity.
Great. Just one final question from me on this, since we are at COP. Can you talk a little bit about how this new methodology aligns with NDCs?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this new methodology is really taking a top-down accounting approach. So that doesn't necessarily mean it is providing specific NDC accounting, but what it does mean is that we have consistency in the data and in the assessment with what national governments are doing for their RED programs. And so, we have an urgency to driving these projects forward. We need to make sure that we are shifting to the new methodology as quickly as possible. So that means we are collecting independently the data. However, we are really trying to work as much in collaboration with governments as possible to use the data sets that they're already producing, whether that's for FCPF or art trees or what have you, so that we're driving towards consistency. That won't always be possible, or that data may not always meet our uncertainty requirements, for example. So we're filling in gaps and adding to that data where needed. But over time, we hope to build more and more of the collaboration. We will be giving all the data to countries in this round and going forward, driving more and more towards what is hopefully in the long run a single data set for countries. So this should really help in terms of their accounting, helping build capacity, but also getting towards a system that is consistent and helps to support those NDCs in the long run.
Great. Thank you, Naomi. And for those of you interested in learning more, we have pages and pages and pages and pages on our website, a lot of resources for learning more about RED and also on our ICVCM submission. So now I'm going to hand the floor over to Judith and I have some questions for you about some of our other commitments that we made back in September and how we're delivering on those. So one of the commitments we made back in December was to launch a research initiative. The rationale behind that was that we really wanted to do our part at Verra to play a more active role in generating data research that can be plugged into the ongoing conversations around the VCM. So we are officially announcing something tomorrow, but you can go ahead and give us a sneak peek into what that is.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for coming today to get this update. And before I launch into the research initiative, I just want to reiterate when we started defining what those critical milestones were for the new era for Verra, we made it very focused and intentional to have clear and tangible deliverables for the marketplace to show that we were committed to integrity, that we were committed to improving the transparency. And so the efforts that Andrew and the team led on the ICVCM and us submitting the entire application with all of the methodologies that were going to be involved or not involved, creating a bridge plan for the existing methodologies was really our effort to make sure that we were answering as many questions that were in the marketplace as possible. So we wanted to be as transparent and say any question we knew the answer to, let's go ahead and get it out in the marketplace. And we're really hopeful about that process going forward. So anyway, that was number one. I just want to recognize Andrew and the team on that. And then the other one was this really revolutionary work on the RED methodology, raising the bar on that as well. We feel just really excited about what's possible. So anyway, those were two kind of tangible results. And we were very focused on a very few like key levers that we felt like were important. And another one was this research initiative. So this was about how do we leverage independent experts in the marketplace to bring new data, insights, and perspectives to the market overall that doesn't exist today. And we feel like Verra has a really key role to play in that. But we also knew we couldn't do our own research because that seems that would be problematic. So we're very excited about this announcement tomorrow. And so we'll just give you a sneak peek. So tomorrow, we are announcing a partnership with the Climate Crisis Advisory Group to conduct some of this research. And for those of you who may not know, the Climate Crisis Advisory Group was founded in 2021 by former Special Representative for Climate Change and Scientific Advisor to the UK government, which was Sir David King. And this group is comprised of 15 experts, academic experts across many disciplines and expertise, and represent 10 different nations. And so they have expertise in climate science and environment and natural resources and energy, et cetera. And so they collaborate and will conduct major research on the market overall, what tools are being used to monitor and report, like hopefully new information. Their goal is to create information that's never been evaluated before. So we're very, very excited about that. So that's the big announcement tomorrow. And we just can't think of a better organization to work with and partner with on this research. And it is just the beginning of other multi-streams of research that will actually be kind of fed into that overall information. And I think we expect the first results to be in Q2 to share with the marketplace. And this is not just to help Verra improve and move forward and leverage the best science and latest information. We want to make this information available to everyone in the marketplace.
Great. So shifting gears just a little bit, I think the very first time we spoke with you, you were talking about digitalization. And I know something that is a really hot topic for Verra and is a very important thing to you. We did make a commitment in September to initiate a multi-year digitalization initiative. Could you give us just kind of a recap on or a heads up on where we are on that and what your vision of that is for the future?
Yes. So pulling back up again before we just kind of dive into the details, what I truly heard in my listening tour is Verra needs to be ready for massive growth and scale, and we've got to work at a new level, and we've got to deliver to our stakeholders on our commitments And we've got to speed up the process. We've got to speed up the transparency, the methodology updates, all of that. Like the market is just demanding it. And so as we went back and thought about how do we prepare ourselves for that, there's really no way that I can see that we can do that without truly leveraging a digital platform and all the technologies that are out there. So this platform is really to enable not just speed of our process, better tools, better data, better insights, all these great things that will happen within Verra to help us deliver, but it's also for everyone who has to connect with us in the marketplace so that it can be not manual PDFs, but really digital submissions and tracking and real-time information sharing, because I think there's just like a rich data set that we're not able to capture and learn from today. And so super excited about that. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be like, steps that we're taking, but we're already making progress. So in Q3, we delivered the project tracker. This was our first step at trying to be transparent about where the project is in the process. We've been getting feedback from our stakeholders like you about how we can make that better. We are committed to doing that. So that's just the beginning, but it's part of this larger project hub, which hopefully will house everything a stakeholder needs. So in this quarter, we're starting a pilot with a select few to actually have a digitalized project submission process. So all of the forms will be online, the methodologies will be digitalized, and so it will help kind of error-proof the submission process, where today someone has to review that process, give you feedback, you missed a field, or that's not an adequate data set for that requirement. So hopefully we can like speed up the process, but also error-proof the process from the beginning. So really, really excited about that. But that's just the beginning. And so there's lots of areas in the process which are just not enabled yet.
Mhm.
And so really excited about that. I think it's the key to scale. So speed, we have to have speed to scale. And the only way to have speed with the quality that we need is to digitalize the whole process end to end.
Great. So we also announced in September that we would be starting a stakeholder services team. That was based on a lot of feedback we got from the listening tour. Could you give us an update on that?
Yes. So it might not be a surprise to you, but we heard that we weren't always really easy to get a hold of. So it seems like it goes in a black box and we send an email and we're not sure who it's going to, and we don't know who's going to write us back. And we have these really technical questions and we have to write these long technical emails so that we can make sure we get the response that we need, that we can move forward. And so as we took that back as a leadership team, it's like, how do we break through that issue as we're growing? And what we've decided to do is to separate kind of the core operations, the people who are either updating the methodologies or the ones who are like actually performing the project reviews, and instead create a separate team that's about stakeholder services. Somebody who's fully dedicated to listening to what the stakeholders need, getting them the answers they need, or connecting them to the right resources. So we want to make that super simple. And we want to just be a little bit more personal and connected and collaborative. And I truly believe that will also speed up the process, because waiting for an answer on something is slowing you down. So we're starting with just 2 people. So be patient with us. We've hired them. They're being onboarded now. We're going to get a sense for how much demand is there? How many questions do we get? How many people do we need? We're also going to do we have the right technical expertise? Like, how are we going to get our systems kind of updated so that we're giving that information quickly? We're also going to introduce new tools for this team where all of the questions are going to be kind of managed like a case, so that it gets opened, it gets managed, it gets closed, so that we don't lose track of it. These are not new ideas, but they're things that we have. Goal is that you have a different experience over the next year than you've had in the past. So we look forward to trying it and getting your feedback.
Great. So for the last couple of questions, I want to kind of pull it up a little bit, get to the 30,000 foot level. So looking ahead from your vantage point at the head of Verra, what insights do you have in terms of how the market is transforming right now and the role Verra should be playing in that?
So I have been in this sector for 10 months now. So I am not an expert on the market by any stretch. However, I am so strongly encouraged and optimistic by what I'm hearing and learning, especially at COP. So it just feels like there's some momentum coming and a lot of support. And we know that the voluntary carbon market has a critical role to play. And so when you think, so none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know when the market's going to recover and at what speed and how fast it's going to grow. But we're taking a very optimistic view. So, and when you think about the role that Verra has to play, I tell this to my team, and I'll share it with you. We see our role as an enabler. We are an enabler for the market. And so, so we are looking at significant growth and saying, okay, what would we have to do to be prepared for that in a very short order? So we are working urgently to be ready for that scale. I mean, just the things that I've heard in some of these forums and in the conversations, there's just a lot of, I feel a lot of optimism. And so I think our role is to be prepared for that. And so some of these are examples that I think we shared today. There are other things that are going on for us, but we're not going to be sitting back waiting for everything to happen. We're getting ourselves ready now.
Great. So this hasn't been the easiest of years to not only enter the VCM, but to take a leadership role in it, as you have done. What motivates you to keep going amidst the turmoil and the criticism?
So I'm highly motivated, and it's for lots of reasons. One is I have the best team. So it's the people that I work with. It's the commitment and the passion and the expertise and the drive and the mission mindedness of our staff. They inspire me every day. And I mean that just so sincerely. The other thing is, we have work to do. So I see major gaps and opportunities. And so we're committed to closing those gaps and delivering on that. So that motivates me every day. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, it's just the impact that the projects that many of you lead are having on the communities that get served. And so we're either enabling great things to happen or we're blocking great things to happen. And I think I shared our mission is to enable finance to flow, people to be impacted, communities to be served, especially those in the developing countries that need it. So that's what gets me up every day. I'm just so honored to be part of this organization and to be here at COP. So it's been great.
Great. Thank you. So that's it for our formal piece of the session. We wanted to keep it fairly short and sweet. If you guys are interested in more of an in-depth update on all of the commitments that we've made, you can check the latest post on our website, or there is a handout outside the room for those of you who still prefer paper. But we do want to open the floor for the next 20 minutes or so for a Q&A. So any questions that you guys might have for the panelists? Yes.
I mean,
You want a roaming?
I can just project that.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're great.
Thanks for that, Hillary and the Verra leadership. As you go through this process of sort of reflecting and improving, when you look back at the Kariba project specifically, have you sort of thought through what could have what went wrong and what you could do better specifically when it comes to that project?
Can you identify yourself?
Sure. Uti Agarwal, BP.
Thank you. If any questions could do that, that'd be great. I can't speak to that project directly. I don't think this is an appropriate forum for that. But I think in general, we have seen that there is a need for the new methodology that we are driving forward and for a transition to that as quickly as possible. I think we've seen that there is a need for greater transparency in a number of ways, both around safeguards and financial transparency. And so those are things that we are looking at very carefully and we'll be putting updates out around. And overall, I think, we need to be focused on ensuring that as these projects are implemented, that they are using the most accurate methods in terms of accounting, working collaboratively with communities, and ensuring that promised benefits reach the ground. And that is in general across all projects.
And I'll just kind of add on. So there are some projects which kind of make it into the mainstream and the news about things that can be improved. But we're a learning organization. I mean, there's things we're learning every week. It's really kind of amazing. And we're trying to what do we learn? What happened? How do we iterate? And was it successful? How do we share that across the board? And if there are things that are just oh my gosh, that's an opportunity for us to put an extra step in the process or an extra safeguard in the methodology. So I don't think we can be afraid of learning and improving. So
yeah, I might just make one last comment, which is that there are lots, no, it's a fantastic answer. Just that there are a lot of really, really good projects out there who do a lot of good on the ground.
That is for
And
sure.
so let's not overlook that aspect.
That is for sure.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, and if just a reminder, if you could just identify yourself and the organization you're with.
Fiona Ryan from Forest Development Climate. It seems that I always talk about pricing, and at a price of about $5 a tonne that you're getting for red projects at the moment. The projects that are going to get up are ones that are kind of business as usual anyway. It's the ones that where there was no threats of deforestation. They're the one, because if you do deforestation, you can put in palm oil, you can put in all sorts of things and make money. But if you're only getting $5 a tonne, you're probably going to take a project that isn't going to do those things. That you're not under that. And I'd be interested to know your model for how you predict which areas are going to be deforested or not. I think it's a good idea to link it to national stuff, like you said. Although all these sophisticated models, you kind of end up in a subprime sophistication type situation, because you can't understand. It's hard. I know you're saying you're going to build with stakeholders, how stakeholders can understand these models and take them apart.
Yeah, so a few things there. Number one, I absolutely agree with you. $5 a tonne is nowhere near enough. And it's really interesting to hear debates around, the carbon capture approaches saying we need $300 a tonne. Imagine what we could do with forests if we had $300 a tonne. So I fully agree on that front. In terms of assurance around the models, what we've put in the new methodology is actually quite simple. It's mostly distance to forest edge, and that is for the benchmark maps. You can, however, submit additional data layers for more sophisticated modeling of where that deforestation risk occurs in a jurisdiction, but it must outperform the benchmark statistically. So we are ensuring that we have high integrity accounting for those projects that isn't manipulatable based on price. And now that price is still going to matter. Where can you have a viable project? But the maps should actually make that quite transparent, because you'll be able to see the allocated risk across the jurisdiction and choose those places where it is viable to address the deforestation in that place. So yeah, I agree with you in terms of the concerns, and I think that we've come a long way in being able to improve on that. And I also think that those improvements should in fact drive up the price, including from the new methodology and also with the context that we have the CCP approval under ICVCM.
Great. I believe there are a couple of questions over here. I'll take this gentleman.
Hi, I'm Kevin Brown, Wildlife Conservation Society. So I just have a question. So with the new consolidated meth coming out, and then with this pathway for reassessing potentially older vintages from other methodologies, I'm imagining a huge surge in demand for VVB services. I'm just wondering how Verra is thinking about, has there been any assessment of what that demand might look like? Are you doing outreach to VVBs? How are you thinking about preparing the market for that?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. So we have a lead for auditing and accreditation within Verra who's come on board a year ago, maybe, and a very large program of how we improve our audit system overall. So that is about increasing capacity. It's about diversifying that capacity to have auditors more around the world is about improving the oversight and operation of them, including a much more collaborative approach to focus on training. And then I think the other big area, as Judith already mentioned, that will help streamline things is the digitization of the process. Because at the moment, auditors and Verra spend a huge amount of time just making sure that the information in the PDs is complete, that the data is in the right format, that it is consistent, and there aren't strange errors of things that are denominated differently across a project. And through the digitization, all of that will be done automatically so that the auditors can really focus on what matters. The accountability of the baselines, the additionality arguments, et cetera. So we're operating on a number of fronts to really try to improve that. But I'm not the audit lead, so we can bring her in and put more information out about that.
Yeah. And this woman here in the blue.
Thank you very much. I'm Sophia Johnson from Climate Partner. And I have a question to Andrew about the ICVCM. So if I understood you correctly, you're looking at having the newer methodologies hopefully get CCP eligibility. And then for issuances from older methodologies, that they might have the possibility to get labeling if they apply certain conditions. So from what I understood from you, that would potentially imply maybe canceling credits to lower the issuances. But my question really is, the CCP criteria cover more than just how many credits you get issued. They also cover things like social environmental safeguards. So if you label older credits from older methodologies with the CCP label, how will you ensure that those credits are actually up to par with other criteria and not just the number of issued credits?
Thanks a lot. And indeed, it is, as you say. I mean, just let me be perhaps a little clearer about the parameters of this festival. I mean, first of all, there's not many project types that this is even applicable to. We have put forward, as I said before, the entire VCS program, and that's only in, I think, three project types, general project types, where the older methodologies have been held back, and RED is one of them. IFM is another. Cook stoves is a third one. It's not something which is applicable across all the field of Verra project types. It's only certain ones. What we will be, so the way it's working is that on Naomi's assumption that the most recent methodology will be approved by the ICVCM, then that will be approved in its entirety, including anything to do with safeguards, which is typically something more of a programmatic level anyway. But what will happen is, if the new project is able to transition to that methodology, then it will have to meet all the requirements of the new methodology. So it's not only to do with the quantification, but any aspects of the methodology. And the way ICVCM will be seeing that is, well, this methodology has passed, and therefore issuance which is made under this methodology is entitled to the new CCP. So I think in doing it that way, we are capturing all of these different aspects, which I agree with you may in some instances go beyond the quantification itself, but it should be incorporated within that transition pathway that we're looking at.
Great. Back here. So you don't have to move, Tina.
David Thing from Ørsted Text Developer. This year you launched the VCS standard and also the VCU label, or the VCS label and the VCU label. How do you see that impacting the market? Would that lead to a bifurcation where you have two set of markets, or how do you see this involving the market going forward?
Sorry, do you mean the CCP label on VCUs, or which label are you referring to?
I saw that you're making a label for carbon removals and not just carbon reductions.
Do we?
One of the things we're doing is we're introducing. It's not introducing any kind of new unit. It's introducing some labels which apply on units. So we already have, well, we've had some labels in place for a long time in the past. Like if a project is also meeting all the requirements of our CCP program, for example, they'll get a CCP label on top of the VCU. And what we've just recently done is to introduce labels which distinguish units which come from emission reduction activities versus emission removal activities. So that's an additional label which is on top of the VCU itself. It's not creating a new program or creating a new unit. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing, particularly because of requirements or programs like science-based targets that put an emphasis on removals, the reason that we've made that distinction is to make it easier for buyers that are specifically looking for removals. And then obviously we've also seen that technological removals have a fairly high cost and likely will have a very different pricing structure. So this does facilitate that in some way.
Yeah, so just very briefly, just to continue for a moment, what it will require is for PPs to come forward and actually request those extra labels to be put on. There are some methodologies where it's very clearly only relating to reductions and others which relate only to removals. So those are the easy cases. We have other situations where a methodology will cover both reductions and removals. And in the latest version of the VCS, and one of the requirements is that verification reports in future will make that distinction between reductions and removals. So that's something which has to go hand in hand with methodological changes over time. So that's going to be a work in progress, but that's what we're heading towards.
And then we had another question up here. And then to the woman in the orange after.
Thank you so much. My name is Chigmin Tenzin. I am from the Fauna and Flora International. Now we're known as Fauna and Flora. Just a follow-up question to what my colleague from WCS was asking on the reassessment of older projects using the new methodology. So which I think would mean that because if you follow new methodology, the active data will be provided by Verra. But as of now, the ECOSOL proposal is all for projects which are will be new. The basically validity period would be in the future, but which means for the older projects, we would like to provide active data for the past. So I would like to kind of know how are you planning to do this? And just to, sorry, I forgot to say, we are quite excited with the new methodology and congratulations to the team and also the team Verra and also the team who developed. And we very much welcome the stakeholder services that you are introducing. I feel like that's very important because we kind of line up some technical questions we would like to get back to Verra very, very soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So we will be opening a call for expressions of interest from projects that want to reevaluate older vintages and where it looks like that's a viable pathway for that project, that it would have sufficient credits left for any adjustment. Then we would go ahead and collect the activity data back to when is needed for projects in that particular jurisdiction. So we'll be opening that early next year to get a sense of how many projects and where those are that want to be able to do that. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jessica Orrego from Mercuria Energy Group. First of all, thank you for these updates and for your commitment to quality and for continued improvements. And also for that stakeholder engagement group. I really appreciate that. That's an excellent update. And I apologize in advance for my barrage of questions that they're going to be receiving from me. But my question's very quick, and it's just whether or not JNR was included in the ICBCM application.
Yeah, just very briefly, and you might want to go into more detail, Naomi, but JNR is part of the VCS program. So in putting the VCS forward, we have also put forward the JNR program as well.
Yeah, I would just add, I didn't mention earlier, some of the updates that are also forthcoming in the next year will be updates to JNR. And that is primarily to incorporate the innovations that we have in the new methodology back into JNR. So the concept of the top-down accounting, the concept of the risk and allocation tool was developed under JNR, and then it was further advanced and elaborated on under the new methodology. So we'll be incorporating those back into JNR. So it is submitted and it will also be updated.
All right, a gentleman in the back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Juan Chan from Permian Global. Quick question. Do you foresee any need for a contingency plan for the deployment of the new methodology in the cases where it might be delayed, or you are 100% confident that everything happens as planned?
Oh, 100%. No, absolutely. So it is currently still possible to develop new projects under VM 6.7 and 15 for avoided unplanned deforestation. So those are eligible to be used. We just made some updates to 7 and 15. VM6 will also be updated soon. And those updated versions can be used until the activity data is available for 6 months in any particular jurisdiction. So we are being very careful about our reviews of those projects in the interim. But that is sort of the fallback until the data is ready in any particular place. So while we are driving as quickly and as hard as we can to get this done according to what we've stated, which would be, the majority of jurisdictions by the end of 2024, that is still a pathway that can be used. And then because we are collecting the activity data back to the start dates that we're aware of in those jurisdictions, it will be possible to reassess back to that original date. So it is a pathway for moving forward now under the old methodologies that allows correcting or updating to the new methodology when it's available.
We would have time for just one more question if there is one. Okay.
Thank you. So my question was first of all, congratulations also that Verra is moving towards the digitalization of its procedures, processes, and methodologies. But my question is whether, are you having any plan to digitalization of the validation and verification processes also, considering the scarcity of the resources and now the availability of the tech and IoTs is maybe more flexible, should be the approach so that we can expand our resources and that we can have digitalization toward this process as well. Thank you.
There's a lot of really interesting potential in that space. And we have a whole program of DMRV pilots that we are looking at different elements where the MRV systems can be digitized. So most of that is focused on monitoring rather than verification at the moment. But I think there is a huge opportunity within the verification space as well for leveraging emerging AI and comparative data sets, for example, to help with that auditing in a way that would help speed it up. So those are forthcoming future innovations at this point. But we're carefully watching that space and we're testing a number of different DMRV pilots at the moment on different aspects and project types.
And I would say, just to add on that, thank you, Naomi, is that we see that as part of the end-to-end process. So don't think that we think when it goes to the VVB, that's not our problem. I think it's like we just want to make sure we're not moving, lots of work to them and then they don't have the capacity. So we're trying to explore how can we unlock that capacity as well, because it's also very manual. And so until we get the whole end-to-end process cycle time right, that's the only time it's going to be what it needs to be for the market. So we're looking at that too.
Thank you. And sorry, I could not introduce myself. Kaushal Goyal. I'm from KBS and I'm from VVB. Thank you.
Well, then I'd love to know what you guys are looking at.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank everyone for coming. Thank you very much to our panel. Just one closing comment. We have committed to doing these kind of stakeholder update webinars quarterly starting in January. So if you are interested in knowing the latest with everything that we're working on, please tune into those. And thank you all for your time today and your great questions. And thank you to the panel.